emotions are very much part of who we are. And it's time to tell all the alphas that part of being a real tough guy is also knowing how to be a person who can be sensitive. Feeling for another and feeling for yourself is very, very human. As a matter of fact, it's the strongest tool we have.
What are the emotions of an alpha male? What emotions should you feel? What processes should you go through? Well, today I sit down with Rabbi Simon Jacobson and talk exactly that. Get ready for 2024 with the Momentumori posters that remind you that you are going to die. They make a great gift for somebody who is highly motivated and somebody who needs to understand that their time is extremely precious. Also, the Not a Journal, the success journal that actually makes you get stuff done, is also on sale with the link in the description at Mulliganbrothers.com. But before that, let's jump into this amazing video on alpha males with Rabbi Simon Jacobson. I think an issue that we see in, I would say, the newer generation is an unwillingness, among men, young men, unwillingness to open up and share and, cry, especially. And I would say with our audience, some of the guys who watch our video especially associate with being an alpha male. And to be an alpha male means to not show weakness. And
right.
I'd love to know your thoughts on that.
Well, listen, our society also feeds that stereotype. The toughness, to me, the toughest people are the people who know how to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is not a bad thing. It's honesty and it's truth. And it's actually the people that are most impressive are the ones that can be vulnerable. But vulnerability in our society has gotten this bad name of, you put it, weakness. Like if you're silent, it means you're weak. Oh, sometimes the smartest people know how to be silent. They know when to shut up. They know when to close, not to speak. It's a tragedy in many ways because our society cultivates that type of, you got to be a go-getter. As a matter of fact, you mentioned men. Many women are trying to copy men and do the same thing. But that approach to life, a more intimate, more gentle approach, that crying and emotions are very much part of who we are, is far healthier and far more real. And it's time to tell all the alphas that part of being a real tough guy is also knowing how to be a person who can be sensitive. And it's just not a dog-eats-dog world of survival of the fittest. Feeling for another and feeling for yourself is very, very human. As a matter of fact, it's the strongest tool we have. Because let me ask you this. If everybody's going to go with an alpha approach, what is that going to do for relationships and love? Isn't love also an element of vulnerability, of surrendering? There's another person. It's not just about me. But it goes back also to this egocentric society we live in. I always tell people, if you see someone that's too arrogant, they're probably very insecure. So they just hide it, they mask it with their aggression and so on. But they're really just afraid. A little child that's afraid. So I think a lot of the alphas you see are not alphas at all. They're just scared children that are putting on like you have those animals that make themselves bigger than they are to frighten others, but they're not really that way. Or the porcupine, the sharpest needles of the porcupine to protect the underbelly, which is the most sensitive underbelly of all animals. So sometimes the outer aggression and the outer strength is just masking inner vulnerability. And it's time to change that attitude. And it's really about finding yourself. So there are times we need to be strong, but there are times that it's perfectly fine to surrender and know there's another person in your life and you're giving, and you're, I don't say submitting, but you're also deferring, you yield. You don't have to always win. You don't have to, But we live in a world, again, it's a very egocentric world where it's about me, survival of the fittest, whoever's more powerful. If I don't take care of myself, no one else will. And that really cultivates an approach of being far more selfish and narcissistic. Like the guy that goes on a date and he speaks about himself for 2 hours. And then he turns to the woman and says, okay, enough about me. Now, what do you think about me? So like 2 levels of narcissism. First he talks about himself. Now he thinks in his benevolence, he's allowing her to talk about himself, about him, not about her. So this is the society. It's driven very much about me. And I think it comes from a deep insecurity. Because again, going back to purpose, if you don't know who you are, you're going to start creating all kinds of fabricated strengths. And in turn, it creates this illusion that being vulnerable or crying is weakness. Not weakness at all. It's great strength. Imagine a kettle that's boiling and there's no spout. It'll explode or implode. Tears, an expression of emotion, is like the spout. You have a lot of emotions in you. It's good to express them. It's good to cry out. It's a sign of a healthy expression. If not, what do you think happens? It ties you up in knots. We know the body keeps the score, as they say. Traumas of our lives that are not expressed, ultimately they don't go away, they just go inward. And then you become this very tight individual filled with these complex emotions and neurosis because you've never allowed yourself to speak. I've met people who told me they haven't cried since they're 5 years old because they were told only babies cry. What happened to all those emotions? They imploded, and the person is generally, usually quite dysfunctional, to be very frank. I remember a guy came to see me, and he was telling me how he's been bullied in his life, and he's always the victim, and he's always being hurt. It was really tragic. It was just made me cry just to look at him. So I asked him, I said to him, tell me, have you ever cried about your life? He says, I haven't cried since I'm 5 years old. My father told me, never cry. Only babies cry. And that, froze him. So I don't know, I didn't even know what I should say to him. I asked him to stand up. He was sitting in my office. And I stood up and I went over to him and I hugged him. He froze. I couldn't tell you, I felt like a solid piece of concrete. And I saw how tight he was. Like his whole body just froze up. Like, I guess nobody had hugged him ever. And I just said, he said to me, why are you hugging me? I said, I just wanted to show some compassion, some feeling for you. But he couldn't even deal with it. And then he said to me this line, he said, if I start crying, I don't think I'll ever stop. I have so much in me. So it's exactly the kettle. So that's called alpha male? That's not exactly alpha. A person who's, unfortunately, my goal with it was one thing, give him the permission, the license. You can cry. You have a license to say I'm in pain. You have a license to say that I was hurt. That's always the beginning of any healing. Break the silence, allow yourself to breathe. Don't hold it in. It's like trying to hold in the breath. No, you have to exhale. And that's part of healing. It's like every infection that festers, you need to open it up to fresh air.
The idea of releasing pressure is, could not agree with it more. And if you keep it within, if you suppress it, I feel like it comes out in weird and wonderful ways. Yeah. And if you keep it in knowingly, I think you do explode. You snap at people. You're angry. It comes out in horrible ways. And I used crying. I still cry like every so often. The grief will catch me and I will cry. But I've learned not to hold it back for sure. Cathartic, great word for it. It really is cathartic to cry, and allow that pressure to be released and come out.
Yeah, God forbid, somebody dies in a family, it should never happen. But the idea of sitting, in the Jewish tradition, there's Shiva. 7 days you sit, you don't go to work, people come visit you. It's very, very healing. Don't try to be so tough, I'm getting back to work. No, there's nothing wrong with taking off a week in honor of a father, a mother, or a relative that has passed away. Besides respecting them, just for your own emotions, allow yourself to, it's like a wound. A wound needs to heal. Don't force yourself, If you force yourself, the wound will not go away.
The body does keep score, it does. I was in a meeting, it was a baby loss meeting, and it was 2 or 3 weeks after Jacob had died, and I hadn't cried. I physically couldn't. I don't know what it was. I couldn't feel any emotion. I couldn't cry. And I went to this meeting and people were sharing their emotions and stuff. And after that, it just released something in me. I was able to cry and it all started to come out. And I started to feel better eventually. But there was a gentleman there who, he said, I felt the same way as you. He said, I didn't cry for 2 years. I just couldn't do it. And one day, my father came to the door, and when I opened the door, he looked at me. He'd not spoken to me about the baby. He'd come to speak to me about the baby. And I fell to the floor, and he said, I cried for 2 weeks. I couldn't stop crying. And it was that point of, it doesn't go away. Suppressing it does not make it go away at all.
No, of course not.
How
old was Jacob?
He was a baby, so he was a stillborn baby. So we was expecting, it was our firstborn son. We were expecting him, and then when he was delivered, he wasn't breathing. So it was it was very difficult. And I think I cried a little bit when it happened, and then I felt no emotion for 2 or 3 weeks, and I really wanted to. Like I remember this frustration with not being able to feel anything. I felt really guilty about the fact that I couldn't grieve him. And I knew my process, because I'd lost my grandparent one time, and my grandmother, she'd passed away. And that process for me was very much seeing her, having those moments with her after she passed, her funeral. Like I really grieved over her. So those 2 weeks where I couldn't feel anything with Jacob were like torture to me. So I knew that I had to cry. I knew that it had to come out at some point. And it did. It took a long, long time period to go through that and get to the other side. But again, it's difficult to talk about sort of the idea of there being a silver lining for that. I remember thinking how cruel it was that this had to happen for this good thing to happen as well. I still can't explain that to people, but I do think that it is the case with a lot of the people we meet. They've been through some kind of tragedy that's led to growth and them being able to help other people as well. I don't know if you see that yourself.
Of course, there's an expression in the Talmud that says when you pray for someone else in need, your need will be responded to first. In science and psychology, in neuroscience, there's a concept of mirror neurons. Mirror neurons, that we mirror each other's neurons. I mean, the classic example is that you see, for example, someone's about to close the door on their finger, and they don't even realize it. You'll even cringe. You'll say like, ouch. Why? You're not feeling it, but you identify so much with the other. You're like mirroring their experience, which is really the power of empathy, that we're really, on some fundamental level, really one. Even though we feel like we're two people, but that's more on an external level, especially if you're familiar with quantum mechanics and science physics. It talks a lot about the intrinsic unity of all atoms. Everything in this world is like interconnected. It's like one large organism. It's only due to our own blindness that we don't realize that we're part of one reality. So the idea that one part of the body is strong and it strengthens other parts of the body is not so surprising. And that's why when we reach out to each other, someone in a situation, someone else can help you in more ways than one, not just because they're empathetic and they're sensitive, but because they're part of you. And when they allow that to come out, that love, that actually is a healing force. It's just like we see people who've been in injury. So then the part of healing is to strengthen other parts of your body, because as you get stronger, it'll also strengthen that part that has been injured. So the human race is that way. And it's a message that most of us are not even aware of. We see ourselves as separate entities, and yes, it's noble to be benevolent and kind and compassionate, but it's much deeper than that. We're all parts of one larger organism. If one part hurts, every other part is hurting, whether you know it or not. And that's why it's so tragic when you see war or genocide or any form of injustice. It's like imagine a human being going the right hand, killing the left hand, or hurting the left hand. Right? It's absurd. But that's the story. So in mystical teaching, it teaches that there's an intrinsic unity that connects us all. But then there's this cosmic concealment that doesn't allow us to see it. So we think we're separate entities, when in truth we're really one.
There you go, a unique perspective that I don't think many people talk about or understand. For me, I love this conversation with Rabbi Simon Jacobson. I have read his book. I'm in his second reading of his book. It's Toward a Meaningful Life. It's a very, very in-depth book with 4,000 years of philosophy, teachings, and faith. Linked down below. I think it's a very, very valuable book. So go check it out. Also, his social medias are linked down below. This video was made possible for your support at Mulliganbrothers.com. So get ready for 2024 with the Memento Mori posters. A poster to remind you that you are in fact mortal and that your time is precious. This represents your life. You fill it in as you go along. And yeah, you get the frame included. It's a very humbling experience to wake up every single day and see your life plotted out in tiny, tiny little squares, and then to cross one of those off. You've used that time, but who knows which box you will not fill in? And that's a very humbling experience to me. I know there is a box on there for me that I will not be filling in. And that means to me that I need to get my mission of Inspire Change out there as fast as possible. I work with passion and purpose and live every day as if it was my last. So if you feel like that's a good gift for somebody, or you want one of those to get ready for 2024 and change your life, hit the link down below. Another tool that has changed my life and changed so many of your guys' lives as well is the Not a Journal. A journal that actually makes stuff happen. It is finally on sale, guys. Get ready for 2024, stock up back on your journals, or if you're buying it for the first time, hit the link in the description. Thank you to everybody who's watched. If you want to see more videos like this, I am on a mission to interview as many inspiring and motivational people as possible. And yeah, hit the subscription button if that sounds good, hit the notification bell if that sounds good, and hit the join button if you want to hear more from us. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.